I'm so pleased to see that so many of our client partners are as concerned as we are at Standard Chartered around how we're going to leverage new and existing technologies to protect our world. We all strive to protect the vulnerable from what may at times feel like an overwhelming onslaught of what is a dark side of technology. Victimization scams, fraud, data theft, protecting our children from harmful messaging and exploitation. This is the goal of safety tech, to help us bridge this gap. Today, we're going to learn about safety tech and how it affects us, what it is, and how it aligns to our sustainability goals. The goal is to reduce exposure to illegal, inappropriate, or harmful material, prevent harmful online interaction with other users, and limit personal online behavior that increases the likelihood of or causes harm. Safety tech, as we will discuss today, is supporting of sustainability goals concerning health and well-being, quality of education, gender equality, economic growth, and our ability to build partnerships to support these goals. At Standard Chartered, as a global provider of banking services, we see thematic risks globally throughout our cross-border payment flows and feel that a key to mitigating these risks is having the right technology and partnerships. We partner with thought leaders in the areas to tackle emerging themes like safety tech, and we're very happy today that we have Professor Aiken as one of those partners. Mary Aiken is a professor of forensic cyberpsychology at the University of East London, specializing in the impact of technology on human behavior. Her work and research as a cyberpsychologist focuses on the intersection between humankind and technology, or as she described it, where humans and technology collide. She is also my friend, and I'm thanking you so much for being here today, Mary. Patricia Sullivan, or Trish, is a managing director and the global head of financial compliance. Could do this to make sure we can just talk about a few housekeeping points. So I'm going to highlight a couple of buttons. Just as mine just currently was. So we're going to be, you're going to be muted, and the cameras will be offline throughout the session. If you would like to ask questions, there are some Q&A areas, and there's a little button off to your right that will show you where you can log a question. So please raise your hand and type in whatever question you would like to ask, and we will make sure that we answer that. At the end of the webinar, you can also click on the red phone, which will take you to, at the end, an exit of the session, but also importantly, an area for you to provide some feedback on today's session. So on that note, I'd like to begin the session, please, and I'm going to start, Mary, with you, if that's okay. Thank you again for attending, and I think it would be really helpful for people to understand a little more about your background, your experience, and also what is safety tech, how it can be used in society, corporations, and especially by banks.
Thanks, Heidi. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. My name is Mary. I'm a cyberpsychologist. So what is cyberpsychology? The study of the impact of technology on human behavior. My specialist area is forensic cyberpsychology, which is the study of criminal, deviant, and abnormal behavior online. And unfortunately, in this day and age, I'm kept very busy. So today we're going to talk about a growing sector of online safety technologies. But the first thing to ask is, well, what's the difference between cybersecurity and cyber safety? Cybersecurity focuses on data. Cyber safety focuses on people. We all know that the pandemic has changed how we live. It suddenly forced financial institutions who had been heading towards widespread digitization for years to globally step up their digital pivot so they could continue to offer a seamless service to clients. And with this accelerated pace of change has come risk. And what we want to look at specifically is cybersecurity and safety risks in terms of how that affects financial institutions, their clients, and the wider communities which they belong. So the new sector, safety tech, complements the existing cybersecurity industry, if you will. Cybersecurity focuses on protecting data, systems, networks, and information from cyber attack. Safety tech focuses on protecting people from psychological risks, harms, and criminal dangers online. Everything from misinformation to online harassment. So we all know that it is critical that our systems and networks are robust, resilient, and secure. It is equally critical that the humans who use and operate these systems are psychologically robust, resilient, and secure. And that's where safety tech can step in terms of facilitating safer online experiences and protecting users from harmful content, contact, or conduct.
It's super fascinating, and Tricia, it would be really good to hear your perspective, hearing about safety tech, and given your experience running financial crime compliance at global organizations, how would you think about, what would you say to our partners and staff and clients? How could they benefit from these concepts and apply them? And as Mary mentioned, they're part of the sustainability agenda, which fits into the overall UN goals. So how would we be thinking about that?
Well, first, thank you, Heidi, for having me on this panel. And it's been a real pleasure to meet Professor Aiken. I've had now several sessions with Professor Aiken to really understand what safety tech is and how it can help support our clients and our communities. And I'm a big fan of safety tech, and I'm delighted to participate here today. So at Standard Chartered Bank, we talk a lot about our mission statement, which is partnering to lead the way in fighting financial crime. And we have now found a new partner to add to our arsenal in this fight, and that is safety tech and cyber psychology. And honestly, it was not something I was thinking about 3 months ago. So this has been a real eye-opener for me, and we can't wait to share this with you today. What does it mean? In order to fight financial crime, by working with safety tech, we now can better understand the criminality of the criminal networks that we're dealing with, and how we can get under the skin and put up defenses to prevent and mitigate abuses of our systems and of our clients. It's also very much aligned with our bank's sustainability agenda. We have a commitment to offer responsible finance, be a responsible company, have an inclusive culture and an inclusive product offering. With safety tech, I'm learning that we can be more responsible in the digital banking that we're offering. By understanding safety tech, you can offer more digital banking and make sure that it's safe and that your communities can trust that they can use it. We can be a responsible company by helping protect our people from cyber intrusions. I like Mary's statement that safety tech is about protecting people, whereas a lot of times there's a focus on protecting systems and technology. And finally, we really want to be an inclusive bank and know that our clients feel comfortable using our products that are most vulnerable populations. For example, where we offer microfinance, that they feel safe accessing those products. So it really is just the perfect complement to our agenda to fight financial crime, plus our sustainability agenda.
Thanks, Trish. And the thing about online safety technologies is that they can provide technology solutions to technology facilitated online harms. It's a win-win. Drive innovation, create jobs, build businesses, and solve techno-social problems. People like me, cyberpsychologists, have been talking about cyberspace for over 2 decades. But in 2016, NATO ratified cyberspace as an environment, as a domain, acknowledging that the wars of the future would take place on land, sea, and air, and on computer networks. We need to learn from that. People are now being born, living, and growing up in cyberspace. Safety tech initiatives will help make cyberspace a safer and more secure environment for humankind. And what's really interesting from an FI point of view is that we can start to think about safety tech in terms of ESG criteria, environmental, social, and governance criteria, in terms of RI, responsible investing, and in the context of what's increasingly described as cyber CSR. So in a nutshell, previously banks and investors have considered business mindful through the ESG lens. But now we want to apply that same analytical thinking to the cyber environment. And what we want to do is, in the business that we're doing, reflect our values across all these environments. So it's about understanding touch points. For example, under traditional ESG criteria, many banks would choose not to do business with companies that were damaging to the physical environment. Well, the same principle applies in cyber context. There's an interesting principle called the precautionary principle, which also comes from the real world environmental movement. And it dictates that it's not up to us to prove that the utility company is contaminating the water or the oil company is contaminating the sea. It's up to them to prove that they're doing no harm. Now let's transpose this construct to cyberspace, up to tech companies to prove they're doing no harm.
It's interesting. In fact, Mary, you spoke recently at the UN Internet Governance Forum, where for the first time, I believe, the UN considered safety tech under the title Online Safety Technology Towards a Global Market. And specifically in the context of UN Goal 9, Industry, Innovation, and Infrastructure. Can you talk to us a little bit more about your work in this space and how it can benefit our industry?
Yeah, I mean, it was terrific, Heidi, for safety tech, 6 months after we published our report, the UK government report, to actually achieve a forum at a United Nations event. And it points to the importance of this emerging area. The forum was an opportunity for different stakeholders to learn from each other, to talk about solutions to combating online harms. Online safety is a multifaceted problem. There's no single solution. And all countries are concerned about the harmful impact on security, on health, and also about societal cohesion. So what did we talk about? Well, at the UN panel, we talked about national responses, collaboration between government and stakeholders and policymakers and industry and academia. We discussed next steps, what a global safety tech market would look like. And specifically in the context of the UN goals, we talked about how we could actually help to safety tech industries to evolve in the global south. So how does this benefit financial institutions? Well, I say this to all the businesses that I work with. It's about leadership. It's about values. It's about reputation. It's about sustainable businesses in all countries. And the UN is an ideal platform to actually bring us all together.
I couldn't agree with you more. So as we evolve, into a more digital world, how could safety tech, help us increase financial and general security then, across the industry?
Yeah, and I suppose the first thing that we have to ask ourselves is, well, what does security mean? It's about trust. It's about having confidence in a bank and a financial institution and what they stand for. Safety tech ensures that the expectations that we have in the real world are matched in cyber context. So what does that mean? As adults, we all come to work, either real world or remotely, expecting to work in an environment that is diverse, that is inclusive, that is free from harassment, abuse, or exclusion. Safety tech is not an invention. It's a catch-up. It's ensuring that the levels of assurance that we expect in the real world are matched in cyber context.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important. And when you think about it, I know, Trish, you've done quite a bit of thinking around this particular thought as well, in terms of, which are the groups that could be potentially most vulnerable, whether in terms of the banking industry, but who do you think could benefit most from safety tech, and how could we help achieve that together?
Yeah, I think, as Mary pointed out, there is quite a lot of focus on children and teenagers and efforts to advise them about safety tech and how they can keep themselves safe online, and actions parents can take to support safe use of the internet. But we don't really see the same focus when it comes to vulnerable adult populations. And that's something I'm really interested in to make a difference. So at our bank, we really have a strategy to provide microfinance to women in need in vulnerable populations, as well as certain countries where additional economic support is needed to combat corruption and other ills that are taking place in the country. And in those populations, there's also a vulnerability, a lack of feeling of safety when on the internet. Women most definitely tend to be more targeted when they're using the internet. There's also not the same protections around freedom of communication in certain countries. Safety tech can come to the rescue and really help shore up the digital products that we're offering. We want our clients to feel that their data is safe, and that when they go on to our digital banking platforms, it's secure, and that they're not going to be victimized when they're accessing their banking products. And I think it's really important that when we offer products to our clients, we don't forget that human dimension, and that we think about what obstacles they may be facing to digital banking. And with the right training and the right education, we can welcome them in and let them know that they will be safe. And it's fascinating to me that the UN has recognized cyber as a domain. I'm looking forward to some SDGs that not only protect life on land and life underwater, but life in cyber.
Yeah, and I think that, when we think about vulnerability online, I mean, the first question to ask is, well, who are the vulnerable groups in real world context? Well, there are people who are subject to harassment, abuse, misinformation, discrimination, unequal treatment, but the same applies virtually, only it can be amplified. And specifically in the context of banking, we should focus on the unbanked, and especially women worldwide who are excluded from banking. And as Trish said, women are disproportionately targeted and subject to abuse online. If collectively we can help to create a more secure and safer online environment, then perhaps we could encourage more women to avail of online financial services in this space. And in general, I can't help but think, and I know I'm biased here, but I can't help but think if more women were involved in the design of cyberspace, it would be a safer, more secure and nurturing environment.
Yeah, I certainly would agree with you on that one. So, but you've also spoken a lot around the cyber effect and how human behaviors change online. So how can human behavior lead to cybercrime vulnerability? I think it'd be interesting to explore that a little bit.
Yeah, as a cyber psychologist, I've been involved in a dozen different research areas. I'm transdisciplinary by design, everything from cyber babies through to hardcore cyber criminality. And the one thing that I've observed is that whenever human behavior interfaces with technology, there tends to be an amplification or escalation. I conceptualized this as a cyber effect. In fact, I wrote a whole book about it, which is now on sale worldwide. And effectively, there are powerful human drivers human behavior changes or mutates in cyber context. So what are these drivers? Well, we have online disinhibition, the work of Sullivan, 2004. Online disinhibition is a form of inebriation online. It means that people will do things in a cyber context that they don't do in the real world. You also have anonymity online. Anonymity is a superhuman power of invisibility, but it comes with great responsibility. You also have online syndication, a construct that I have described. And what is it? It's the mathematics of criminal, deviant, or abnormal behavior online. So in the real world, these abnormal, criminal, or deviant behaviors are bound or capped by the laws of proximity and domain. What does that mean? I'm a criminal in the north of the country, you're a criminal in the south of the country. What was the risk of us coming together to syndicate, to actually explore our mutual interests? Well, it was very high until we had the internet. Now, within 2 clicks, these communities can syndicate to find each other. My prediction is, and I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am, is that online syndication will actually drive the incidence of cybercriminal, deviant, and abnormal behaviors in general population. And that's why it's so important that we recognize these human factors. I'm the lead researcher on a European piece of research, Horizon 2020, a project called CC Drivers, where the EU have invested 5 million euros in actually exploring human and technical drivers of cybercrime. So let's take a motive like revenge, a very human motive in terms of engaging in cybercriminal activity. Now let's match that up with the availability of exploits or malware on darknets, where that human driver can easily be facilitated. So that's what we're looking at. That's what we're studying with a view to staging intervention. And with a view also in terms of young population of what we describe as juvenile cyber criminals, and actually looking at how do we block these pathways into cybercrime and how do we find new pathways out of cybercriminality. So basically, in terms of threat, digital banking, just like tech, just like our teenagers, it's always on. 24/7 access spans the entire working day for people who want to abuse the system. So let's think about this in a real world context. Back in the day, the threat opportunity was a narrow window of opportunity. It was a bank teller across a counter and somebody trying to commit fraud. Now there exists continuous opportunities, multiple threat vectors to commit cyber fraud via phone calls, posts, texts, social media, emails, and so forth.
Patricia, do you want to add anything to that?
I think so. I think the expansion into multiple different types of media is really presenting an enormous amount of criminal opportunity for cyber criminals. And I think everyone will have heard of the dark web becoming vast online marketplaces that are, with multiple levels of security designed to keep out your normal internet users. And it can be quite difficult for law enforcement to take down some of these sites. And if you take one down, they spring up, with another name in the next day. But yet it's also where criminals are operating. And so for my AML investigations teams that are doing tens of thousands of AML investigations each year, and these are deep investigators with many years of experience, many times their investigation will lead them down a trail where, in order to understand the picture of what they're seeing in financial data, they need to access the dark web to understand what some of the references mean, to follow the money, and be able to present a complete picture to law enforcement. But yet in those instances, we have to be really careful. One, our bank doesn't allow our desktops to access dark websites because of the cybersecurity risk that would present, but also because of the psychological risks that we could then expose our staff to. Once you see a horrible image, you can't unsee it. And additionally, you could come into sight of something that's illegal to see. So we have to be quite careful. But one of the ways we've addressed that is by partnering with organizations like the National Cyber Forensic Training Alliance, also known as the NCFTA, or the Cyber Defense Alliance, which are long-standing public-private partnerships to tackle cyber crimes, the oldest public-private partnerships, in fact, that we have to tackle cyber. And when we go on site at the NCFTA, we're able to safely get access to the dark web so that we can build out pieces of a criminal puzzle that we're seeing and then present a full picture to law enforcement. But it has to be done very carefully and with the right safeguards.
Yeah, I think I would imagine that becomes really quite critical. I mean, Mary, would you have any examples of where you've seen safety tech applied, to some of these groups, and perhaps what you think the future would look like?
Yeah, I think for me, that and particularly in more recent times, safety tech methodologies that counter the spread of mis and disinformation are critical to civil society. And basically anything that undermines, that undermines trust affects online banking practice. So there's a spectrum of influence, and it runs from people who are very vulnerable, whereby their confidence can be undermined by fake news regarding the security of their savings, all the way over on the other side of the spectrum, where people can be overconfident as a result of misinformation and engage in risky practices like, password sharing. So if we're to look at specific examples of human safety risk online, and all of us and all of the group logging in today are at risk in terms of blackmail, coercion. From an SCB point of view, all partners, staff and clients and all organizations are vulnerable. You can be blackmailed to get access to your financial institution or financial information. Another specific example of risk in this area of online safety technology is the risk, the really human risk regarding insider threat. And what we've seen is this surge in threat and fraud and sabotage. But more recently, to Tricia's point, in terms of darknets, what we've seen is insider threats actively advertising access to the networks and infrastructure of banking or financial services companies on criminal forums on these dark web marketplaces. So additionally, we also see sophisticated threat actors who are actively soliciting and recruiting insiders. So this is a toxic combination. And when we think about the internet surface and deep, we have to think about this as an environment. And as Trish says, we have to think about how we can upskill to actually deal with these threats. So what are the solutions? So let me point to a couple of solutions, because we just don't want this to be a worry fest. We want to have some positive solutions. Where can safety tech help? Well, the first thing that we can think about is to what I describe as think like a profiler. Become cognizant of your digital exhaust. What's that? It's all that trace evidence that you leave hanging around in cyberspace. And effectively, look, we're on a call now. There's background information here. Plug in the background could say whether I'm in the US or I'm in Europe. A high school yearbook on my bookshelf could actually open an opportunity of attack in terms of somebody like me, or indeed people on this call, are never going to click on a link that we shouldn't click on. Well, I hope not anyway, or never open an attachment. But if we suddenly got an email or a link from an old high school friend, oh, open this, remember that great, vacation or holiday, then we might do that. And that information could have been extrapolated from your digital exhaust to actually provide this attack vector. Anybody look at my bookshelf, all they're going to do is get a great education in the behavioral sciences. So what we see now is threat actors are actually targeting remote workers. This is a change that has come with the pandemic, and similar in the same way that they target in-office employees. However, working remotely provides a larger attack surface. And in addition to that, humans are more psychologically vulnerable as a result of the stress and strain of the pandemic and the stress and strain of trying to juggle everything as they remote work remotely. So what can we do? Well, one answer is to develop cyber situational awareness. Become cognizant of your trace in cyberspace and look at methodologies that can actually help you establish that. For example, go search yourself on multiple platforms. And I don't mean the first 10 results. I mean, have a really deep dive. Have a look and see, think like a profiler. How much information could you extrapolate about you, your friends, your family, your network online, just through search? And at a more sophisticated level from a corporate point of view, there are companies in the sector, digital risk protection, and they have software that can actually help to identify when human or data assets are at risk. And in terms of online safety technologies, they can help to provide solutions and remediate damage.
It's fascinating. So, taking a look at your digital exhaust, something I think that's, everyone will probably be doing as soon as they finish with this and doing those searches. I think you provide some really excellent tips there. Thank you. Trish, we talked a little bit about the dark web, but I think really when we think about our own, how we're advancing the ball, as you mentioned earlier, around, taking a look at financial crime and how do we effectively really mitigate some of the risks if you can't access, some of the materials that are out there. So how do you really, you've talked a little bit about it, but what else, what other techniques are available to us that would allow us to really get in there and understand what's going on on the dark side?
I think this point about your digital waste is really important, right? We're moving to a world where it's no longer about your face as your identity, but your digital fingerprints, right? What IP addresses are you using? What sites do you visit? How many keys are you using when you're typing? All of that actually is leaving that cookie crumb trail that investigators can follow and can actually then help link your criminal activity to other accounts at a bank that have been similarly accessed. And it's been really fascinating to us that we've been able to have a much better lens on money mule accounts that are typically used to cash out any number of illicit crimes, including crimes that were committed with virtual assets. Money mules are often shared by the same digital actors. We no longer need to know what you look like, but we do need to know about your digital cookie crumbs. And what's really, I think, important about that is, and understanding cyber situational awareness, is there's a chain between a cyber attack and cash out. And we need to help educate our people on what this kill chain is. So for example, we mentioned data breaches. We can train people to don't use the same passwords, to not share passwords, have very difficult passwords. But inevitably, there will be cyber breaches and large troves of personal data are stolen. That often ends up on the dark web for sale. But what's important to understand is you also need to have strong fraud prevention controls in place at organizations, because that stolen data will soon enough end up being submitted to governments for fraudulent unemployment benefit claims. The receipt of those fraudulent proceeds will end up in mule accounts at banks. So there's an interconnectivity. You need to have strong data protection controls, but you also need to understand what you can do to protect from fraud when fraudulent claims are being presented with stolen identities. And then when that money is deposited into a bank for cash out, how do you understand money mule accounts and arm yourself to seize these assets the minute they come in? So it's a connectivity between cyber risk, fraud risk, and AML risk, and that is something we're doing to help raise our cyber situational awareness. We can't think in one silo. We have to think across all three as part of our safety tech and our empowerment of our teams.
And the thing is that we're living in this world, this cyberspace, where there are domains where cybercriminal population are thriving, and they're effectively, for the most part, beyond the reach of law, and certainly beyond the reach, for the most part, of FCC analysts. And I suppose when that question is posed to me, well, what can banks do? What can the FCC analysts do? My response is, well, what did the FCC analysts do 20 years ago, in terms of access to then equivalent pathways to crime? They engaged in best practice. They shared information with each other. They shared with law enforcement and with regulatory authorities. And these groups are well equipped to deal with these areas. They always have been. To Patricia's point, the dark web and dark nets in particular are deeply disturbing and psychologically damaging places. Do not try this at home. That's what I say to people when we're talking about this. It sounds fantastic. It sounds exotic. It is not. On entering the dark web, you can be exposed to unmoderated, extreme and illegal content. As Trish says, as we say in psychology, what is seen cannot be unseen. There is no command delete file for the brain. I personally know how damaging it would be to unleash financial institutional staff onto the dark web, unsupervised, untrained, and with no support. And as Trish said, with no safe structure in terms to actually carry out this investigative work. Again, law enforcement are well trained. They're well placed to deal with the incident side of the equation. And as Trish says, there are lots of international bodies that you can collaborate with to actually further your investigative mission. So just in the same way that we wouldn't encourage staff to visit really dangerous neighborhoods in the real world, let's not encourage people to do that on their own online.
No, it's really important, I think, because as you say, it can be quite disturbing. Personally, I've never seen it, and never do want to. So, but I think it's helpful for people to understand that this is a very it's a scary place, and it's not something that we would encourage anyone to be entering into. But if safety tech could be enabling awareness around harmful digital and physical interactions, how could we also use it, to further enable some of our economics and drive, people to prosperity, right? How could we think about it along those lenses?
Yeah, good question, Heidi. I mean, the thing about it is that safety tech can help to build long-term confidence in technology in general, and in digital banking in particular. And in turn, that competence can support trade, investment, not just for domestic transactions, but also for global and international business. So we were talking earlier about vulnerable population. Safety tech promotes trust and confidence in levels of security needed to, for example, support personal remittance. So those people who can be exploited outside of the banking system through, for example, payment service providers, where they are charged extortionate amounts to remit money. So we want to make the online banking environment a safe and secure and trusted environment for them to engage. In terms of safety tech in general, there are no international standards regarding creating this trusted and safe environment. There are standards around, say, for example, age verification. But this is a very, very new area. This is an exciting new frontier. And it's a chance for us, this panel, this discussion, it's a giant step forward for humankind, a giant step forward for us to make cyberspace a safer and more secure space. And effectively, as this market is emerging, we want industry to have the right access to enterprise level tools so that they can maintain safe and healthy online communities. And this means consistent global messaging on the ROI, or return of investment, in safety technologies. It also means championing companies who are getting it right. And just by logging in today, every company that logged in today, that's another step, first step maybe, in that journey towards getting it right.
Hear, hear. So Trish, maybe I could also ask a little bit of your view when you think about the convergence of cyber psychology and cybercrime, and in your experience, what are some of the crimes that you've seen enabled by this dynamic, and also maybe even just in the day-to-day experiences that you would have?
I think the one area that I would like to talk about, because I think it's so prevalent and causes so much damage, is the ransomware attack. Many organizations are being victimized by ransomware attacks, hijacking their systems, their clients' very confidential data, and then asked to pay some ransom in order to have the systems unlocked and the data secured or deleted. It's causing obviously great distress at board levels. And also for individuals whose confidential data could be leaked. And in discussions with Professor Aiken, I thought it was really fascinating to understand how, when you're building your ransomware playbook, you need to be ready to respond if that ransomware attack comes to your organization. That's not the kind of thing you want to have to scramble around at the last minute and figure out how you're going to respond. But cyber psychology and safety tech very much has a role in helping an organization prepare for a ransomware attack. And Mary, maybe you could speak a little bit more about this, because I find this just absolutely invaluable.
Yeah, as they say, there's nothing new under the sun, and certainly holding somebody hostage or to ransom is not new. What we're just seeing is it being exploited online. And in the area of online safety technologies and in cyber psychology, I've been involved in work in and around how we take real world, live hostage negotiation skills and now apply them to a ransomware event. You get hit by this, how do you even begin to interact with that sophisticated threat actor, that adversary in cyberspace? So even being able to buy time and know what to do and know how to negotiate in cyber context is really, really important. And, my colleagues at Interpol, they published a report recently, which actually showed that malware and ransomware attacks have risen by 36% during the pandemic. And malicious domains, use of them, by 22%. Phishing scams and fraud by 59%, and fake news by 14%. And, to quote Interpol, they're saying cyber criminals are developing and boosting their attacks at an alarming pace, exploiting the fear and uncertainty caused by the unstable social and economic situation created by COVID-19. So how can safety tech increase our awareness? And, what can it do sort of to help different groups? Well, let's look at a spectrum of possibilities. In terms of children, we know that children are vulnerable to cyberbullying. Up to 60%, depending on what research you look at, of children have been cyberbullied. So safety tech can offer solutions in terms of filtering and content moderation. Trish, you mentioned students being recruited as money mules. There's a lot of mis and disinformation that actually attracts or tempts students to engage in this activity, quick, easy, get-rich-quick scams, where they don't really realize the implications and the consequences of just lodging this amount to pass it on, or being scammed into doing that. And effectively, look at another group, bank account holders, they're vulnerable to identity theft, and also in terms of, in some markets, spousal abuse and coercion. And safety tech solutions can help tackle online harassment and this abuse. On the client's, staff and business side, everybody is vulnerable to blackmail, bribery, corruption. The safety tech solution focuses on better digital hygiene, greater psychological resilience and hardiness, cyber situational awareness, as we've spoken about, and utilization of professional online safety technology services.
It's really incredible. It's a lot to think through. So Trish, what would you recommend, to institutions and clients that are watching, how would they think about, implementing cyber safety tech to ensure, and ensure their economic viability, but protecting themselves as organizations?
Absolutely. I think what really is coming through for me here is we can't forget the people, and it comes through in a couple of ways. One, people who are victims because they're exploited by different types of cyber criminals. It could be the elderly, it could be the romance scheme, business email compromise, as Mary said. People act differently online than they do in person, and they're more vulnerable. We need to understand the psychology behind those victims and help them have the right safety tech in place to protect their assets. We also need to understand the criminal mindset of these cyber criminals, and how can we better arm ourselves when we're negotiating with them if we're the victim of a ransomware attack. And make sure you have the right experts as part of your playbook when that terrible crisis moment hits your organization. We also need to understand the psychology of our clients who are in vulnerable populations accessing our products. When we offer digital banking, are we really aware of some of the concerns they may have, where they may not feel safe? And how can we build into our training and our marketing to these clients that, no, we have your back, right? We have these controls in place, and your assets and your personal information is safe with us. And then at a more broad level, I really like the idea of bank-wide and corporate-wide training that brings in this human element. So we did a great campaign for financial crime compliance. We called it The Whole Story, where we helped our teams understand that money laundering wasn't just about money moving through banks. Behind every dollar that's laundered, there's a real victim. It could be an enslaved person. It could be someone who is abused through narcotics, any number of horrific activities. And what I'm envisioning here is a cyber training campaign that really gets behind the tech side and really focuses more on understanding how people act online and versus how they act in real life, and bringing that out so people understand where they might be vulnerable. And I think it would make for a great training campaign. So that's something I'm taking away from this.
I remember the Whole Story campaign and the images that were used, how powerful it was also, because even those images for me were very disturbing, right? And so, when we started to really look at what a difference we could make when we come together, it really, it's terrific. So I think that starting a campaign along those lines sounds actually quite powerful. Mary, what steps would you offer to an institution? How would they go about instituting, safety tech within an organization?
Sure. So, for everybody on this call, there are probably a number of good things that you're doing already. So a good starting point is create an inventory around the good work that you're doing at the moment in terms of, addressing human factors in cybersecurity or safety tech factors online. And the next step is to think about, what needs to be done to address any gap between your existing work and the principles that we're talking today, this new territory that we're talking about today. So I'm just going to give you some top line ideas. We're going to circulate some research papers and reports afterwards, but this is extracted from our safety tech taxonomy or classification system that we developed following a research report into the UK market, the online safety technology market in the UK, which designated the sector safety tech. You know, we've got fintech, we've got health tech, and now we've got safety tech, we've got a designated sector. So in the taxonomy, at a system level, what you can do is look at removing illegal content, for example, child exploitation material and terrorist content. At a platform level, you can tackle potentially illegal content or conduct, such as hate crime or harassment or coercive behavior. At a device or endpoint level, you can have user-initiated device-based products that can be installed to help protect users. And you can also deploy network filtering. This is particularly important in an era of remote working. The next classification in the taxonomy is the information environment. So this is the flagging of content with false, misleading, or harmful narratives. We spoke about that in terms of money muling, and we spoke of that in terms of trust. And what we can do is look at the provision of fact-checking and the disruption of disinformation, i.e. flag up trusted sources, you know, build confidence. And, you know, I work in the startup sector with a number of companies. There are lots of companies getting excited and entering this space to help try to provide solutions. And the next area in the taxonomy is online safety professional services. And there we can look at methodologies for addressing, evaluating, or mitigating potential harms. There's an area I'm interested in, which is cyber psychometrics. We all run psychometric testing for new employees coming in, but you got to know who they are in the real world, and you got to know who they are online. If human behavior changes, then we need cyber psychometrics. And then from a, basically, you know, we focus a lot on the bad news around the pandemic, but all of us have some sort of innate level of psychological resilience. The good news about the trauma that we've been through in terms of the pandemic is the one way that you can build resilience is through adversity. So a positive outcome of the pandemic is that we are building psychological resilience as we speak. So from a financial institution perspective, stakeholders that should be involved in trying to get your safety tech mission on track are senior client-facing representatives, reps with tech expertise, and some members who can speak to some of the vulnerable and disadvantaged groups that we've discussed today. The next step is engagement with communication of values, standards, and your expectations, along with communications generally around safety tech. What is it? How does it apply to your business or your sector? And then execution, which is probably, as Trish said and Heidi said, is best probably achieved through formal training modules.
Thank you. We're going to open it up to Q&A in just a few minutes, but I know we're closing up on the hour. But before I do that, I would just like to ask both of you, you know, how do we go about this? Because I think about, you know, the world that we're in now, it's all about collaboration. So what are some of the ways that we could be partnering? And I think for participants on the call also, what should they be thinking about in terms of reaching out or connecting with us and partnering on this? Love to hear from both of you, if you don't mind.
Well, I think, you know, there are a couple of things we can do is, first of all, people on the call can identify your objectives, maybe map them against UN goals, refine your vision, prioritize stakeholder groups. Who do you want to train? Staff, clients, or both? Pilot safety tech approaches in selected geographies in a target way, and then create professional content to support. I'm happy to follow up with anybody on the call on how this might manifest at a UN level. We've covered a lot of ground today, so we're going to give you papers and reports to actually have a look at. If anybody wants a deeper dive, please feel free to contact me. You'll find me on LinkedIn or through the team here. But basically, the real opportunity for all of us is to pioneer bringing safety tech into global collaborative combating cybercrime discussions. It's to factor humans into the security equation. It's to facilitate the understanding importance of online safety technologies. Effectively, this is about cyber leadership. all of us working to create a safer and more secure cyber society for all of us. So thank you, Heidi and Trish and SEB for hosting today, and thanks everybody for logging in. Trish?
I did one point. I saw a question in the chat here about how do we make the case to our boards, in order to get funding, and that's a great question. And what I have always found is you can make the case to your boards for where you need new investment when they understand the value it delivers to their clients, and also to help preventing significant financial loss. So one of the questions I would be asking my board is, do you have your ransomware playbook ready? And where you're not going to have a lot of time to respond? And are you sure you have the right tools in that playbook to respond in a psychologically cyber educated way with the right expertise on board? I'd also ask my board, have they done studies on their digital banking penetration? And are there pockets in communities where women are not accessing digital banking at the same level as other members of the community? And do we know why that is? And what arsenal can we build to make sure that women feel safe accessing digital banking? Because it is a key strategy for many banks. So for the boards, let's make the case about why this helps protect our clients, keep our products safe, but also helps present a case for protecting your institution at a very dark moment and making sure you're ready to respond. So Mary, in all of our prep sessions, I just want to thank you. I learned so much in each and every one of them. And I feel much more cyber equipped to go forward myself.
You're going to qualify from the Cyber Psychology Academy just after we wrap up.
And thank you, Heidi.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you very much. Thank you, both of you. And we have a number of questions that have come through. We are up on the hour. So what I'm going to suggest is, as we're sending out the materials, also what we can do is produce answers to all of these as well, so that we can send them out to all of the participants. And they have the benefit of hearing your views on what's been posed, and we can put that forward. I wouldn't be able to do justice to we've got well over 25 questions coming in now. So I would like to thank you both also for the efforts and all of the agreements coming together and having this conversation. I think it was very robust, and I think this idea of checking the digital exhaust and helping companies think about the way that they're going to be managing this going forward is really quite important, and one that I think we should absolutely continue to pioneer as we go forward. So I look forward to continuing the dialogue, and thank both of you for all of your time.
Thank you. Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trish.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye.